Yeah. Well, I suppose she made it back. You know, it's just hot. Well, it's hot. It's all right. We've been watching you all during the show. Well, I suppose before I start again, I'll have what we call a little digression. In other words, I don't know what to do next. Can we have the lights down just a little bit, please? Gotta say please. I don't. That's good. I'm setting the mood. For those of you who know nothing about show business, like me, yeah. Well, let's see. Every summer when I was a boy, we'd spend part of those 3 months down on my uncle's farm. Now there's another uncle down there by the name of Uncle Dan. Well, Uncle Dan was a Negro slave. He used to tell us stories every night. When it got real dark and the flames in the chimney would cast ghastly shadows on the wall, the wind would howl around the edge of the house. We were scared before I even started. Well, he did finish every night with a story. He never ceased to scare me. It's called The Golden Arm. And he told it something like this. Once upon a time, there was a mean old man who lived way out on the prairie. Suddenly had a wife. This man was really mean. And one day his wife died. He took her out on the prairie during a storm in the winter, and he buried her. He went back to the house, and he got to thinking. The most special thing about this wife of mine, that she got a golden arm all the way from the shoulder down to her fingertips. And he was so mean, he just got to thinking that he had to have this golden arm all for himself. So he went out in the storm and pushing against the wind, and he finally gets to the grave, and he digs up. He takes the golden arm, and he covers her back up, and he starts heading for the house again. The wind's blowing, it's going. And then he hears something behind him, like where the grave is, all mixed in with the wind. He hears, he looks behind him, and he starts running for the house. And he gets inside, gets to the door, and he hears behind him, and he runs upstairs, and he gets to his bedroom, and he closes the door, and he hides in the bed, and he pulls up the covers over his head and ears, and he waits there, and he hears someone at the front door. It's going, pat, pat, pat. Somebody's in the house. He hears in the wind. Goodbye. scared. He doesn't know what to do. And some all the time happens. And the door opens to his bedroom. And he hears on the floor. Pat, pat, pat. Then he hears cold breath right down on top of his shoulder. You got it. Then he'd send us to bed. And then we'd remember all the past sins of our lives. I always remember what a terrible time that was to think about. Because at that time we're all good Presbyterians in Missouri. We knew that every small sin we committed meant the destruction of 20 miles in all directions, including all the men, women, children, and cattle. Do you ever include hymns in your presentation? Believe it or not, I did write to Andrew Carnegie once about a hymn book. Just to add some variety. I wrote to him, "Dear Mr. Carnegie, I hear you are rather prosperous. I would like a hymn book. It costs $3. I will bless you, God will bless you, and it will do a great deal of good. P.S. Don't send the hymn book, send the $3. I wanted to pick it up myself. I've already answered that one. It says here, Mr. Twain, you look rather prosperous. You must be sitting together. You look rather prosperous. Have you had any hard times? And if so, would you care to tell us about it? Yes, I have had hard times. No, I don't care to tell you about it. But I will anyway. I've gone broke about 2 or 3 times. But before I had any money to lose, I was much younger. I went to Washington to see if I might make some money to keep myself alive. Well, I wrote a book about my experiences in the Holy Land. And I came across a man by the name of Swindon. Swindon, that was his brother, the historian in Washington. Well, between us, we came up with an idea which is common in newspapers today. It's called the syndicate. We had 12 newspapers in the backwoods. And once a week, we'd send them 24. We'd send them 12 copies of the same letter. They'd pay us $2 a piece for it, so we had $24 a week coming in. You know, Swindon was just a bully of a man. He was a Scotch Presbyterian. And he loved his religion. He took all his joy from it. He hadn't a vice in the world, unless an ample appreciation for Scotch whiskey might be called a vice. Of course, I didn't think so, because to a Scotsman, Scotch whiskey is as harmless as milk is to the rest of the human race. Well, $24 would have been riches to us if we hadn't had to support that jug. But consequently, we were always sailing pretty close to the wind. I remember one time a shortage came up. We had to have $3 by the end of the day. And I didn't know how we were going to get it, but Swinton told me that the Lord would provide. Of course, I knew his religion was working on him. I hadn't had the same confidence in the matter. I figured if he'd had my experience, well, never mind that. Well, anyway, by the time he was through with me, he had convinced me that the Lord would provide $3 by the end of the day. So I went out on the street, and nothing presented itself, and I didn't know what to do. So I went into the Ebbett House, which at that time was a new hotel, and sat down in the lobby. Well, pretty soon a dog came loafing up and looked up at me and said with his eyes, "Are you friendly?" Well, I answered with my eyes that I was. And so we were a pair of lovers right off. He came up, put his chin on my knee, and I petted him rather nicely. Well, pretty soon, General Miles, the hero of the land, came strolling in with his brass and his braids and his medals, and everyone's admiring gaze on him. Well, he stopped and he looked at the dog. You could tell there was something in his eye that showed that he appreciated dogs of this beautiful type. He walked over and he said, "My, that is a beautiful dog. Would you consider selling him?" It was amazing. Swinton's prediction had come true. I said, yes, I would. I said, well, that's just bully. How much would you like for him? $3. $3? Well, the dog's worth $50. I can reconsider the price if you'd like. I wouldn't want to harm you and wrong you. If only General Miles had known he was no more capable of wronging me than I was of wronging him. No, $3 is the price. He said, very well. He took $3 out, handed it to me. I gave him the dog, and he went upstairs. About 10 minutes later, a middle-aged man about that tall came walking into the lobby, and he's looking under the table, around behind chairs. "Have you lost something?" He said, "Well, yes, I have. I've lost my dog. Have you seen him?" "I don't know. Let me see." "I know, I think I did see him, and I could find him for you if you'd like me to." He said, "Well, that's wonderful. Please find him." He said, "Well, it might take some time. I hope you wouldn't mind reimbursing me." "Oh, that's all right. I'll pay $10, $15. How much do you want?" $3. I figured that Swinton had told me that the Lord would provide $3, and to ask for any more than that would seem like sacrilege. So I said, "I'll be back." And I went upstairs to General Miles' room, knocked on the door, told me to come in, and I did. I said, "I've got to have the dog back." He said, "Why? You sold it to me." I said, "I know, but the owner wants him." "The owner wants him? You mean you sold me a dog that didn't belong to you?" "Well, I thought it might be some accommodation to you." "Accommodation? Well, that's the most amazing thing I ever heard. You sold a dog, and yet it didn't belong to you. What would you do if I sold you?" No, wait a minute. I don't want to argue with you anymore. You must admit it was a fair price. I only took $3 for the dog, and furthermore, and the general told me, stop. Give me the $3 and take the dog. So I did, went downstairs and collected $3 for my trouble. And that's how I made $3. Now that's the story. Some of it's true. Any of you would like to take your coats off? Mr. Twain, you remind me of the character of a scientist. I can't remember who you remind me of. Maybe it's Edison. Have you made any scientific inquiries? Oh, it's a two-part. Well, thank you. Edison's quite a man. I met him once. Worked with him on electricity. They generally give him credit for it, but well, as a matter of fact, I've made some scientific investigations myself into the human race. It's interesting. Maybe I could share some of that with you. Well, the first thing I made an investigation of was man's idea of heaven. And I just look what it is. It's like man himself. It's interesting. It's grotesque, rather funny at times. Now remember that on Earth, not 1 in 4 people can play a musical instrument. Now mark that, remember it. Now also remember that on Earth, half the people will not stay in a room 2 hours if there's any kind of singing at all. Most people don't even want to know how to sing. Remember that. Now you have the facts. Ask yourself, what kind of heaven does man have for himself? What has he invented? Just look at it. People will be singing all day long. They will also be playing harps all day long. Whereas on Earth, well, they'd stay there forever and ever too, whereas on Earth the place would be empty in 2 hours. I've also made some other investigations. Got the statistics right here for you. I've done some studies which make me renounce Darwin's theory of the ascent of man from the lower animals. I've come up with my own theory, the descent of man from the higher animals. You know, I made a test once. I'd read a story where an English earl had come to the western United States for a hunt, for sport, and to provide meat for his larder. Well, a bunch of them went out and shot 72 of these great beasts, ate half of one and left 71 to rot. For sport. So I thought I'd make a test with an anaconda to see the difference between an English earl and an anaconda, if any. So I put 3 or 4 calves in a cage with an anaconda. Of course, a grateful snake snatched one up, crushed it, and swallowed it whole. But then he sat back, relaxed. He was completely satisfied. Didn't hurt the other calves at all. I tried this with several other anacondas with the same result. So I finally come to the conclusion that the English earl was evolved from the anaconda and lost a great deal in the translation. What do you think? Women's liberation. I don't know too much about that. But I have done a few studies of women in relation to men. You'll probably all be interested in this. I see. During 23 days out of the month, with the exception of pregnancy, a woman is fully competent. In fact, she's as competent as a candlestick is in relation to a candle. In fact, she yearns for the candle. She wants it, as dictated by the law of God in her mind. Whereas the man is only competent from the time he's 16 or 17 years old till about 35 years later. And after that time, the candle becomes softer. And on those few occasions when it's in working order, the experience is of little or no satisfaction to either party. Whereas his great-grandmother is as good as new. In fact, women have the high privilege of unlimited adultery all the days of their lives. From the time they're 6, 7 years old till the day they die. But man has noticed this a long time ago and has made up a law and accredited it to God, saying that a woman can have only one husband. Well, the woman believes this. Believes that God only wants her to have one husband, whereas she can handle any 3 men on any day of her life. Well, heretofore you've seen that man is a fool, yet I think I've just proved that woman is a damn fool. Well, Mr. Twain, oh, here's a good one. How old are you? It's been a long time since I was 19. I'm 70. 70. Actually, I'm older than that. 70's enough. After that, there's too much risk. Well, when you get to be 70, you're supposed to be able to sit up there on that 7th terrace summit, tell the rest of the world how to get up there. Well, they all do it, you know, all those garrulous old people. They explain the process and dwell on the particulars with senile rapture. Well, I've been interested to explain my process for some time. Now I think I finally have the right. I think I've reached my 70 years in the usual way. I was sticking strictly to a scheme of life that'd kill anybody else. Of course, I do have a few habits I try to follow, a few rules. I make it a habit never to smoke more than 1 cigar at a time. I have no other restrictions. As for diet, I try to stay strictly with things that don't agree with me, until one or the other of us gets the better of it. Until recently, I'd always gotten the better of it myself. But I did, last April, quit frolicking with mince pie after midnight. Until then, I never thought it was loaded. That's for exercise. I've never taken any. I can never see any profit in being tired. Of course, now the point I want to make is that you've got to make up your own rules and then stick to them. It's not as easy as it sounds either, because there's always somebody trying to reform you. Take all the joy out of your life and replace it with dreariness. But don't you let them. You can't make 70 by an easy road, don't go. No, I suppose it's a good idea to obey all the rules when you're young, just so you have the strength to break them again when you're old. Of course, you must remember that experience is our best teacher. The man who takes a bull by the horns is getting 60, 70 times the information as the man who hasn't. The man who takes a cat home by the tail is getting information that's always going to be useful to him. Chances are he won't take the cat home that way again. But if he wants to, I say let him. It isn't always easy to be eccentric, you know. Well, I don't think this reforming business sticks very well anyway. My dear wife, God rest her soul, tried diligently for years to get me to give up profanity. I never had much luck with it. I do remember for the first 10 years of our married life, I used to keep a very close watch over myself. Whenever I felt the urge to curse, I'd run into the bathroom, which had a very thick door on it, and cut loose and relieve myself. I could never get over the idea that cursing provides a relief that is denied even to prayer. Well, anyway, I remember one time in particular, Sunday morning, I was in the bathroom. I remember I was shaving. I always have a great deal of trouble with shaving. I can never make it through without a few verbal helps. This particular morning wasn't too bad. I just used a few of them, very low voltage type words. You see, I always wanted to make sure, though, that I had the door closed completely so Livy couldn't hear me. That is, I always made sure, except on this morning, and I didn't know it. Well, anyway, I tried to put a shirt on. The top button was gone. Of course, I was equal to the situation and moved up the voltage of my words, tore the shirt off, and threw it out the window. And it landed on the bushes below, where all the neighbors on their way to church could stop and admire it if they wanted to. I put another shirt on. Again, the top button was missing. I tore that off and threw that out the window. Tried a third shirt. The button was gone. Well, I cut loose with a cavalry charge and happened to rear back, and I noticed that the door was gaping open about that far. I froze in my tracks. I took a great deal of time finishing my toilet that morning. I thought I'd try to escape through the window, but it was too small. And anyway, it was on the third story. And then I figured, well, I'll go down there as if nothing has happened, and maybe she'll just ignore it. So I strode down the hallway, getting slower and slower all the way, because I knew I wasn't going to fool her, until I got to the middle of the bedroom and froze. I felt something. You know how you feel when somebody's watching you. I turned and I looked. There's that beautiful face, framed in long black hair. But in her eyes there was something strange that I'd never seen before. Her eyes were snapping and flashing with indignation. It seemed that the angels on the bed
So I kept quiet because I was a person entirely in need of charity.
But then she looked at me and said, "There, now you know how it sounds." Well, I had to break up then. Of course, then she had to laugh herself too. And then we both broke down completely and we were reconciled by the end of the day. Well, I've seen a lot of countries in my life. Seen all the foreign countries I care to see, except heaven and hell. I have only a vague interest in one of them. However, I would like to meet my old ancestor, Satan. I can have no special regard for Satan, but at least I can claim to have no prejudices against him. May even be I lean a little his way, on account of his not having a fair show. Well, all religions issue Bibles against him, say the most injurious things about him, but we never hear his side of it. We have heard only the evidence for the prosecution and yet have rendered the verdict. Now, to my mind, this is irregular. It is un-British. It is un-American. It is French. Without such a precedent, Dreyfus could never have been condemned. You know, I was talking to my pastor, Joe Twitchell, the other day. And I looked at him and I said, "You know, Joe, I'd like to be cremated after I die." He just looked at me and said, "I wouldn't worry about that if I had your chances." Well, maybe it won't be so bad down there after all. But my friends tell me I'll probably have a hard time in the front office. You know, when I think of all the people that I know are just as contrary as ever, and yet they've gone to a better world, I'm sure it won't be so bad at all. I always remember the story about the poor man who tried diligently all his life to attain heaven. When he finally got there, the first person he met was the man he'd hoping all that time was in hell. Well, he's so disappointed that he picked up his satchel, inquired the way to hell, and left. So there you have it. Heaven for climate and hell for society. That's an interesting thing about Satan, though. You know, we may not respect him, pay him homage, for that would be indiscreet. But at least we can admire him for his talents. Any person who for untold centuries has maintained the imposing position of religious head of 4/5 of the human race and political head of the whole of it must have executive abilities of the highest order. I should like to meet him. In fact, I'd rather meet him and shake him by the tail than any statesman on the planet. I probably will, too. Well, it's about time for me to go. You know, I'm reminded just right now of one of the favorite stories I've read. An episode in it, from Dana's 2 years before the Mass. It reminds me of the affection that people have shown me. There are many of you here that have. The story is about the little captain of the Mary Ann, little tugboat. Went from Nantucket up the coast a little ways, carrying junk, little knickknacks. Well, he had the habit of hailing every ship that came along. Well, one day, here came a big ship, the Begum of Bengal, under a cloud of sail. Of course, the captain of the Mary Ann took his horn and went, "Ahoy! What ship is that?" and where and whence? And the captain of the Begum of Bengal took on his horn and said, it's the Begum of Bengal, 147 days out of Singapore, carrying spices. Where and whence are you? The poor man's ego was crushed. He just took his trumpet, said, only the Mary Ann, an hour and a half out of Nantucket, not carrying anything in particular. Well, you know, when I'm by myself, I think of myself as just this little Mary Ann. And yet when I'm in the presence of the people that love me, give me affection, that give me life, I'm the Bay of Begum, 147 days out, loaded with spices and headed for home. Thank you. I came in 1835 with Halley's Comet. It's coming again pretty soon. I intend to go out with it. In fact, it'll be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet. No doubt the Almighty has said, here are these two indefinable freaks. They came in together, and they must go out together. Oh, I'm looking forward to that. Well, good night.
Let's try. I'll give an encore.
Now, a warm reception like that fills me with charity. In fact, I feel the same charity toward everyone. That man who came home late from his club one night, just filled with the loving spirit of mankind. There was his house weaving and weaving around at the end of the street. Well, he moved around for a while, and when his front steps finally got in his area, he made a jump for him. Well, he carefully made his way up the steps. He was looking for the keyhole. When he came around to where he was, he stuck it in, turned it, and plunged through. And there was the stairway looming in front of him. And step by step, he made his way up till he finally got to the next to the top step, reached up his foot, and it hitched up, and he rolled back down. He had his arm over the newel post at the bottom. He just looked up and he said, God pity the poor sailors out at sea on a night like this.
Damn good.